And then Anand, you have actually straddled both across the US and India, right? So I think your first two startups, it was a lot of the early YC community building, and a lot of the efforts were actually very India focused. And now, of course, you're doing a lot of US. What are some of the very tactical nuances between kind of both the markets, right? Like, let's say if you have to do or plan out or strategize a community building effort, it could be online or offline in the US versus India. Like, how would your approach be different in both these markets?
Yeah, I mean, my experience in India, B2B and B2C, was very different from what we're doing here. I think the same things don't work everywhere, right? So, to your point, like it's just in India, the efforts were, and especially in fintech, actually, it's like heavily regulated industries, right? So, community events and thought leadership just didn't work as well there, right? You kind of needed like other things. For example, if it was B2C, you needed discounts and coupons, and if it was B2B, you needed just to penetrate this kind of web of regulation and make it easy for people, and so those things were more important there, in my view, and out here it was not necessarily that. It was, if you look at a lot of the great software companies here, you can be kind of surprised when you log in, right? Like you're like, oh my God, that technology looks really quite straightforward. There's nothing complex out there on there, right? Of course, that's a beauty of great software, that it looks great on the outside and it's kind of probably more complex on the inside. But people pay like top dollar for it, right? And it's interesting because they're willing to pay a premium if the solution solves the problem in an elegant way. And something is what I call, like I've kind of coined this phrase of reassuringly expensive, right? Right. So out here, the paradigm is very different, right? You can't come with a discount and expect to win, because actually in the US it's a race to the bottom if you do that, and actually people perceive you in a very different way. Customers will think, actually, you know what, there must be something wrong with this product if it's too cheap, right? And we're actually struggling with some of that now, so I'm trying to address that by changing the perception. I can't like suddenly hike prices, but changing the perception or doing usage-based pricing and things like experiments like that we're doing now. But certainly here, value is the key driver, right? It's not price, and so whereas in India it was clearly price. It's a very price-sensitive market. So I think that, yeah, different geographies.
No, I mean, everything drives perception, and the US is a very sales and marketing driven society in general, right? I mean, my kids are growing up in this country, and I see, the world that they are growing up in is so different from when I grew up in India. And in fact, it reminds me of, what Spencer told me, which is when they organize these roundtables, right? Like they are specifically going in for really nice restaurants, very nice wine tasting events, right? I mean, they could do this in like a random microbrewery as well. But I think a lot of this is kind of adding to their perception because their buyers are real top tier executives of very large financial institutions, right? So a lot of it comes down to trust. And I think to your point of reassuringly expensive, that assurance it has to be driven at a very subconscious way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, they've done an incredible job, and others like them have done incredible jobs of bringing those diverse audiences. And actually, interesting, they've done it very niche, right?
Yeah.
These roundtables and dinners are small, like 10, 15 people. That didn't work too well for us. We have a much lower ACV, that's partly why. But there was other reasons as well. We're going for very, very, very early stage companies, like pre-formation companies. They're going after Series B, C, D kind of companies, right? So for us, these larger mixer events work really well, right? And like 100, 200 people, and a thematic discussion panel, followed by mixer, that kind of works well for our audience. But for different people, it's different. And I think in each of these cases, you build a momentum by continuing to beat the drum. And this is one of the problems I saw, that over a period of time we were kind of sustaining it like month after month after month, and it reaches this kind of crescendo, and if you stop, then suddenly like you lose all the momentum. And unfortunately we suffered that, and we shouldn't have. It was my mistake really to stop that momentum. It was kind of getting expensive in one way, but also it was hard to sustain. It was like really huge efforts, right? It takes surprisingly a lot of effort to do these kind of things even out here. And so my warning to everyone is if you're doing this kind of approach, don't stop, right? It's like podcasts, like in the podcast game, it's the ones that survive are the ones that just absolutely religiously post every week without fail, and the ones that get the furthest. That frankly, it's a longevity game. You just have to keep at it, right? You can't stop after 5, 10 podcasts. So I think that's the answer here. Is you have to just keep at it, and then if you stop, the momentum stops. So you kind of have to find more affordable ways, of course, at our stage to do it, and we're finding those now, for example, through partnerships and integrations. But it does carry on working for sure, So.
Yeah, I mean, I think my view on that is like all these systems that have very high leverage, I think they tend to function in this way, right? Where you need to keep that momentum, you need to keep the flywheel going. It applies to any form of like even written content or podcasting or community outreach or conferences. And I think you typically, when things become popular, we see them at the tipping point. I mean, like Harry Stebbings or 20VC talks about it, right? Like he only became famous after his like 500th or 1000th 20VC episode, right? So we didn't hear about him till the 1000th episode.
Yeah, exactly. It's just incredible because everyone assumes it was an overnight success, and it's not at all. He's done 1,000 episodes or something, and it wasn't big until halfway in. So yeah, it's a classic example. And the same rule applies out here. If you just keep at it through, and it comes through a variety of ways. All the things that I mentioned before, through blogs, through content, through posting, through thought leadership, through events, through webinars, through podcasts, through many things. And for us now, interestingly, one of the ways we're showing surprising growth is interestingly through integrations, right? And that's actually working better for us than it's probably our second biggest driver now. The first, interestingly, has always been word of mouth, right? And from our existing customers, that just keeps growing, like it's inevitable, right? But the second is now quickly becoming integrations, which, for example, to take that Brex example, when you try and add a team member in Brex if you're a customer, you try and add someone as a team member in Brex, you'll see a list of kind of preferred bookkeepers, and we are now in one of those, right? And so that kind of integration, which was a kind of complex thing to make happen, it drives growth to us, right? And that really is a result of kind of a lot of experimentation. So I don't think the same things have to work for everyone, but yeah, you have to find your niche really. So